Well, I'm fortunate that I'm here today with Dr. Alex Sanchez, our founding president of Doñana Community College. And so I'm looking forward to learning more from you today about the founding of the college and what your vision was. And so, Dr. Sanchez, I know that before you were the founder of our college, you came to Las Cruces. Tell us a little bit about how you came to Las Cruces and came to Doñana Community College.
Well, the first time I came to Las Cruces was as a freshman at New Mexico State University, and graduated with a master's degree in counseling and guidance. And of course I had made some commitments because I took ROTC. And so the Air Force said, it's time to do your duty. So I reported for duty, and from Lackland Air Force Base, they sent me to Tachikawa, Japan.
Oh my.
And so that was quite an experience. You know, I was Deputy Chief of Training, and we were training people from all over the Far East. You know, different governments, armed forces would send their people to train as aircraft mechanics, you know, logistics, anything to do with flying airplanes and getting from here to there. You know, so I did that, and then I guess I got noticed by the commanding general of the command, and he needed a protocol officer, so he asked me to be the protocol officer. Well, for a farm boy from Tomei, I didn't know what a protocol was, you know, but I guess I had good manners, you know, so he appointed me as a protocol officer, and it was a wonderful experience. I got to meet U.S. senators coming through, and of course, foreign generals, you know, coming in, and had some liaison work with the Japanese self-defense forces, you know. So it was a great experience, you know. Excellent. And you know, I really liked the Air Force, but I didn't want to make a career of it, you know.
Sure.
And I went on to stay in the Air Force Reserve, and I can tell you more about that later. But anyhow, when I came back to not a job. I didn't have a job, so wound up in working construction in Roswell, New Mexico, where my in-laws lived. And so from there, you know, I worked that summer, and I was looking for a job. I found a job at the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Gallup, and I was in personnel work. And so I became a personnel officer, and then I moved to Kirtland Air Force Base as a personnel officer, and then on to Alamogordo, where I also worked in personnel. And I read a ad for, they were looking for a placement director at New Mexico State University, and gee, to get back to your alma mater to work is a pretty good deal, you know. So I applied, and I got selected, and I came, and I was their placement officer, and that was kind of neat because my protocol experience came in handy, because we had all these recruiters from all over the country coming here, and I had to interact with them, you know. So having had that experience, it was just a wonderful thing. And then the university got the federal financial aid program came in, so they gave me additional duties. I was placement and financial aids.
Oh my.
So we handled lots of money and gave a lot of things to students. And then there was an opportunity to submit a grant to recruit and retain students from underprivileged backgrounds and who were first-time college goers in their family. And I started a student services program, which was a retention program.
Excellent.
And we did pretty nicely with it, actually. We were passing through to the junior year about 90% of the students that we recruited. So that was a pretty good record.
That was fantastic.
But there was an unintended consequence of that.
Okay.
And let me tell you about that, because this is one of the surprising things. We didn't have enough money to hire a lot of counselors. So we decided, you know, there's this work-study program where we can get some money from them. We'll match it, you know. So I recruited, I don't know, probably a dozen or maybe a few more upperclassmen, and I tried to match sort of their own background, you know, that maybe they came from a not a privileged background or a very small rural community and so forth. And so they would act as tutors, you know, make sure that they registered for the right courses and that they, you know, attended class and so forth. And they would meet with them at least once a week. And then on Friday, we had what I called a coffee and tea hour, you know, and so my wife would bake bizcochitos, and those are New Mexico cookies, by the way.
Yes, I love them.
And we would have a bunch of cookies out there, you know, bizcochitos out there, and students could drop by anytime, you know, and have a cup of coffee and eat a bizcochito, and I'd sit there and talk with them, you know, and all that sort of stuff. So it was, you know, I think that was part of the success. But with the upperclassmen, the unintended consequence was that those students got so enthused about education that a whole number of them were going on to graduate school.
Neat.
And that to me was a just wonderful thing.
Well, that's fascinating. It's a wonderful story because Dr. Sanchez, you were way ahead of your time because you understood how to retain students where now, you know, there's big movements on retention, and you discovered the very thing that I think many of us have discovered today, the importance of that relationship with students.
It's about relationships.
It very much is.
Absolutely.
Well, certainly, I mean, there's a lot in your experience, you know, in terms of bringing you to the university, but you are the founder of a college. So where did your vision for the start of Doniana Community College come from? What sparked that interest for you?
Well, when I was doing the special student services, I knew a lot of people on campus, and one day I got a call from Lowry Davis, who was the much beloved Dean of Continuing Education, and he said, you know, I've noticed that you've been doing a lot of good work throughout the years and so forth. He said, we're starting this new campus, and he said, would you like to head it up? You know? So that's how I got started at Doniana.
Very cool.
And you know, we didn't know what kinds of programs. You know, as a matter of fact, I asked Lowry. I said, Dean, I said, what kind of programs did you have in mind? And he says, hey, kid, that's why we're going to pay you the big bucks.
Absolutely. So then how did you discover that? Because you didn't get a lot of direction.
Well, there was some groundwork that had been done. You know, I mean, there had been a couple of feasibility studies in the early 60s, you know, and this was 1971 when Lowry approached me, you know. And so I looked at those feasibility studies, and a lot of the impetus for it had started from business groups in town in Las Cruces, you know, and then from the school districts. The school districts had been pushing the university to start a branch, you know, because most of them had given up their vocational programs, and by that time, you know, and so they were pushing the university to start a branch campus focused on job training. So, and the studies that had been done before showed that there was this need, you know. And then the university had some programs that were either certificate or associate degrees that were more appropriate for a community college, you know, type of environment. And that's what the branches were, community colleges, you know. They didn't have the name, but that's what they were. And so slowly those programs were transferred to the Doniana branch, and then we started a bunch of new ones.
Absolutely.
And one of the new ones that we started was in wastewater treatment.
Very neat.
And we looked all over the country for somebody to head that program because there wasn't anybody around, you know, that could do that. And so we finally settled on a candidate, and he was well qualified, but his salary demands were a little bit high, you know. And so I went to Lowry and I said, you know, can we pay him this much? And he said, well, at this level, we're just going to have to go to the vice president and see if he. So we made an appointment with Dr. Roush, and so we went, presented the case to him, you know, and then Dr. Roush asked, you know, well, how much does this guy want? And Larry said 20,000. 20,000 was a lot of money in those days. And and so Roush said, Lowry, I don't even pay an English teacher that much money. You know? And Lowry just blurted out, and he says, well, when you can find me an English teacher that can turn shit into water, I'll hire him.
Absolutely.
That thought went through my mind, oh no, that's the end of the program before it even starts. But it got approved, and
Yes.
so we started the water technology program.
Well, certainly your persistence and then bringing in an instructor has laid a great foundation, because today the water program, tech program, is still alive and well, and we train wastewater treatment technicians for the whole state of New Mexico, and a lot of them are out through the United States. So thanks for your persistence.
Well, that's wonderful. And, you know, I guess I have to be thankful to Lowry and to Dean or Vice President Roush for seeing the light and approving it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and budget and salaries are still issues today too. So I'm sure
yes.
I can learn some things from you on that. And so, you know, you earlier were telling me a little bit of a story about naming, you know, and we wrestle with names too as we opened learning centers. So how did you settle on Doña Ana Branch Community College?
Well, that wasn't the real name that we settled on.
Okay.
And we toyed around with it, and, you know, we said, well, it's got to be something that just rolls off your tongue, you know, and that people will remember, and easy to say, and so forth, you know. And so we just came up with a whole bunch of things. The acronyms weren't appropriate, you know. So, but then somebody did mention, as I look back on it, probably jokingly, but he said, well, the school is going to be located right across from the Tortugas village, you know, so why don't we just call it the Tortugas Institute of Technical Studies? We do know that, you know, but of course he intended it as a joke, you know, but it's kind of funny, you know.
Absolutely.
And then that's when we finally said, okay, that's it, you know. We're going to call it the Doña Ana County Occupational Education Branch. DACC. Doesn't that just roll off your tongue?
DACC works, absolutely. I at least that one I will say versus the Tortugas
Yes,
acronym,
yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So certainly as you got started and you had a vision, you had the challenge with finding instructors, what other challenges did you face in helping this kind of fledgling little college really get rooted into the fabric of a university and a fabric of a community?
Well, there were a lot of challenges at the beginning, just as you probably now face challenges, you know. Of course, money was always an issue, you know. And I think I spent more time in Santa Fe than I probably needed to or wanted to, you know, because that's where you go for the funding, you know. And so if there was going to be funding, I had to go and present the case, you know, for it. And it started from the very beginning, you know. I wrote the feasibility study that we took to the Board of Educational Finance, and because that was the board that coordinated higher education in those days, and they approved programs and budgets, you know. So I had to convince them, and then once that got approved, of course, it had been approved by the regents, you know, and all of that. But then once the BEF approved it, then it had to go to the legislature. And so I spent a lot of time. You know, if Santa Fe wasn't such a nice town, I probably would have resented having to go there all the time. But Santa Fe is such a nice place.
It is a wonderful place, but is it a lot of miles between here and there? So I can
you bet.
imagine the miles you put on your vehicle.
A lot of time on the Interstate 25.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, certainly, you know, as you've had the challenges in funding, there's also the other side of that. There's some things that you look back on and you feel really proud of, or you have a really strong memory for. So what do you think, you know, not just the founding of the college as a legacy, but what else about maybe the founding of that college that you're really proud of or that you remember fondly as you look back on that time?
You know, one of the things that I remember that was just really important to me anyhow, and that was that we formed a team. You know, we worked together. You know, I made it a point to go around and talk to the different instructors and actually see the instructional program. I remember one weekend, one Saturday, I came out to help the welding instructor unload steel and put it in the shop, you know, and so just, you know, you get to know people that way. But I think the faculty themselves were just tremendous. You know, they really interacted with students. You know, and I think that's one of the things about the trades and the technical subjects is that you just can't stand up in front of the classroom and lecture. You know, there's a little of that. You know, but most of the time you're out there, you know, showing them this is how you work the tools, this is how you do this is how you do that, you know, and no, Joe, that's, you know, that's the wrong tool for that, you know, and that kind of thing. So I give most of the credit to the faculty. You know, they did a tremendous job, and they all worked together, and that was just an experience that has stayed with me all these years.
Neat. Well, certainly that is a legacy that you've built on, because the strong commitment of the faculty are still there, and the teamwork effort and collaboration is still there. And so that foundation that you provided us is really, really something to be proud of.
Well, I'm happy that's happening.
And of course, along the way, we all have things that we look back on and think about, wow, maybe I should have done that differently. So do you have anything you look back on and you think, wow, I could have done that differently? Or maybe something that you wanted to do that you just couldn't accomplish because of funding or other reasons?
You know, I'm sure there were a lot of hiccups along the road. Money was always, like I say, a problem, you know, and I wish there had been a better way or somebody else to do that, you know, to go out and get the funds, but and let me run the college, you know. But that's not the way things work. I think one of the disappointments was we looked around for, you know, programs that had potential. And one of the things that came to light was the fact that fire training for firemen, you know, was important and needed. You know, some of the fire departments so I went around and talked to some of the fire departments, and they said, yeah, that would be great, you know. And so we put together a proposal. I even hired a guy that was a specialist in fire training academies, and helped us write the proposal. And so we had it all, you know, ready. We got it through the Board of Educational Finance, and so I went to the legislature, and I had to go before a hearing at the funding committee. And one of the legislators asked me a question, and he said, Dr. Sanchez, he says, why couldn't this academy be placed in Las Vegas, New Mexico, you know? Well, you know, I answered the question, but the nature of the question, the thought went through my mind, I don't think it's going to make it. So it didn't fly. But it was a wonderful proposal. It was a great idea. But
Absolutely.
That was a disappointment.
Absolutely. The good news is it eventually did happen. And so, again, the legacy and the vision that you left allowed us to develop a fire science program several years. So
Good.
Many appreciate the ideas that you left to the presidents who followed you.
Yeah. Well, I had left a feasibility study here, so maybe somebody took a look at it.
They must have. So it's a positive thing. You know, and certainly as a president, you know, and you alluded to this in an answer earlier, you know, it's the team and it's the people. But are there some people that you remember in particular very fondly that you reminisce about that you might want to share? People whose memories are very important to you.
Oh, well, you know, after 43 years and many thousands of people you've met and worked with over the years, you know, That's sometimes hard to remember, but I remember everybody just being very, very kind and cooperative and really concentrating on their job. But one of the persons that was very helpful at the beginning, in the second year we hired Wade Fredrickson from Santa Fe. He was with the education department up there, and he was their specialist in vocational education. So we hired him, and he came down, and so he was so helpful in starting the vocational programs, you know, and things like building trades and welding, and you know, he knew all about that. So it took a load off my back.
Absolutely.
And and there were a number of other instructors. I'm trying to bring some of them up in my mind, you know, but I think that, what's his name, Doug Roby, is he? Yeah, and I think he's still around.
He is still around.
Yeah. So I'm sure there are many, many others, and I just can't bring them up just like that. You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, certainly, you know, in your time that you've visited with us, you've had an opportunity to tour a little bit. You've stayed in touch with the college over 40 years. So based on your vision and kind of where you see the college today, how do you feel?
Wow, I'm amazed, you know. I think, I don't know if I envisioned exactly what you're doing, because that's very, it would have been very ambitious of us to think of all the things that you're doing now, you know. And of course things change, you know, technology changes and so forth. But I think that the college is doing some tremendous things, and they're being innovative. They're looking to the future rather than the past. And I think that's kind of what education ought to be. It's not just about the past. Yeah, you keep what's good from the past, but you look what's coming down the road, you know, what should we do next, you know, so where are the jobs going to be, and, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that in that respect, I think the college is doing a tremendous job. I'm in awe as to some of the things that you're doing.
Neat. Well, I have to say I'm in awe that you had the vision and you figured out so many things that weren't in place, that you've put in place and that have continued, and that has allowed us to build on that legacy. So as we kind of wrap up our time, are there other things that you might want to share with us that, as you think about your time as the first president at the branch?
Well, it was very time consuming, you know, and I think in some ways my family should be given credit, because probably I didn't spend as much time with them as I should have, because, you know, traveling to Santa Fe and going other places and writing proposals into the night, you know, and things of that nature. So fortunately, all my kids have turned out very well, you know, and well, let's see, what else can I'm trying to think of something else, and you know, but I think that, let me state this, you know, I think that one of the things that was very helpful to me is the learning that I did, the lessons that I learned here in starting up the Doña Ana Community College really launched my career in thinking of higher education and community colleges in particular. And so, and I've gone on to have a very successful career in these areas. I was president of 2 community colleges. I was vice president at the University of New Mexico when we started 2 branch campuses, and I did that, you know, and then I went to California as president of the community college there, and came back to New Mexico to Albuquerque TVI, which is now known as Central New Mexico Community College. And but then I had a real wonderful opportunity to go to the state of Oregon at Oregon State University, where I was a professor in a doctoral program in community college administration.
Oh, how neat.
And the neat thing about that was that one of the stories that I told the students, you know, was my experiences in founding the Doña Ana Community College, and how important it is, you know, how you treat people, how you go about doing things, and so forth, and the management by walking around
Yes.
theory, you know,
Yes.
and then, you know, handling budgets and funding and lobbying and all those kind. I could talk about those from not from a textbook, but personal experiences,
Yes.
and I could tell them about the scars that I had. So I think that was my icing on the cake, you know, from my career. And a couple years ago, I retired from that position.
Neat. You know, earlier, Dr. Sanchez, you were sharing with me another challenge that you faced, and it was around nursing. So tell me a little more about that challenge in nursing, because I've had my own.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, nurses are very particular, as you know, you know, and that's a good thing, you know. But we had the associate degree in nursing that was transferred over from the university. And then we added on a licensed practical nurse, which was a one-year certificate program, because there was a need for immediate, you know, hiring, and they could get jobs, you know. So we did that, and then what we did is blended the two programs, the associate degree and the LPN, the licensed practical nurse. And what that resulted in was that the associate degree then would have the clinical part in the first year, you know, and then the more theoretical part in the second year, which was exactly opposite to the way it was being done in the traditional programs, you know. So when we went to the National League of Nursing for Accreditation, and our students, by the way, were doing very well, you know, but when we went to the National League of Nursing for the accreditation, they said, no, this program is not what our normal program is. You know, this is, they're supposed to have the theory first and then go for clinical rotations. So we said, but it's working, you know, it's doing fine, you know. They said, no. So we kept after that, you know, and you know what, they finally agreed to it. You know, it took us many years, but we did succeed, so I'm glad. And there's several other programs around the country, I understand, that are similar to it. And the beauty is, it's some of the students, a one-year certificate is enough for them to get a job, you know, in a variety of settings, you know, where they need the nursing skills, but they don't need all that more advanced classroom work, you know. So they can go out and get jobs, you know, and that's, some people, that's what they want, you know, they want that job, you know. And then those that want to go into more supervisory nursing can go into the associate degree or the Bachelor of Science, you know. So to me, it made a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
To the National Board of League Nursing, it didn't make sense at first, but we finally were able to convince them.
Absolutely. Well, the persistence there is a good thing, because as you said, sometimes nurses, they have one way to do it, and they want it done a particular way.
Oh, yeah.
But the success was in the results, and the graduates passed the test and they got jobs. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. You know, Dr. Sanchez, as you talked about the founding, you certainly talked a lot about the funding being a challenge. Well, what about the space to deliver instruction, and how did we end up here in this footprint?
Well, we had almost nothing to begin with. As a matter of fact, it was nothing. Larry Davis one time said about our spaces, he said, the Doniana branch doesn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of. He was from Appalachia, by the way, and he had this delightful sense of humor. And it was always fun to be around. But he was serious, you know, but I mean, there's a way to do that, and he had a way with it, you know. But at any rate, you know, they gave us a space for the administration in an old house that was set on the corner of University and Espina. And that's where the Starbucks is now, you know. So, you know, I kind of feel proud of that, you know, that they put a Starbucks in our old place. You know?
Absolutely.
Of course, we didn't have a Starbucks then, you know.
No.
But at any rate, you know, we had to scrounge around for spaces, you know, because we didn't have a building. And so the university had some old barracks that they were no longer using, you know, so we were able to just do some cosmetic work and move in there, and then they let us use some of the classrooms on campus. The nursing program was housed at the hospital, and they had a old conference room and adjoining facility, you know, that they were no longer using, so they said, you know, you can use this space, you know. And they were very cooperative, very helpful to us. But you make a lot of contacts, you know, in the community. Our building trades, we didn't have a place for it, you know, but we noticed that down in Gadsden, they were building some homes under the poverty initiative of the federal government, and they had a big grant to do some low-income housing down in that lower valley area. And so we teamed up with them, and that's where our students did their internship, you know, is just going out and doing their practical work on building actual houses, you know.
Oh, neat.
And we had a culinary arts program where we actually, what happened in the culinary arts program, we started a restaurant over on the highway going out towards Deming. We talked them into letting us use their facility, and so students worked over there, and then there was some space here on campus where we did the classroom work, and it was a really dilapidated old building, you know, and it really looked like it should have been torn down instead of, you know, so that's where we did the classroom work, and, you know, and those kinds of things. And but, you know, the university was helpful at the beginning, you know, but then decided we needed a campus, you know. That was ridiculous. You couldn't go on and build anything worthwhile with that kind of an environment, you know. The students deserve more than that, you know. So we set about to plan a new facility, and we had it all planned out, you know, and so forth. We went to the legislature, we got it funded, or part of it funded, but part of the deal in those days was that the local communities had to come up with money, and so I went to the school districts, Gadsden School District, the Hatch School District, and of course the Las Cruces School District. And since they sort of had been the instigators, you know, they had started out saying we need more of these kinds of occupational programs. So they said, yeah, I guess. And I said, well, if we're going to have a campus and we're going to have something that we're going to be proud of, we have to pass a bond issue. So I went to work in publicity, and one of my daughters reminded me the other day, she said, yeah, you had us out handing pamphlets, you know, about the new campus and the bond issue, you know. So, and we did a lot of work, you know, and planning the strategy to use. And it's very difficult getting a bond issue passed, you know. It's not simple, and you got to get people over on your side. So that's what we did, you know. And then we enlisted the school districts to you know, talk it up in their areas, you know, and so forth. So it passed.
Oh, man. And there it is. You went through the building.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And certainly the grassroots effort. And clearly, as I hear you tell the story of the founding, it's very, very clear. This really was a public education, community, higher education partnership. And the businesses were very much wanting this partnership. And, you know, hence the name Community College has even more meaning today for me.
Absolutely. And you know, because of that, and that spirit is retained into today, that's why, you know, the following generation of administrators were able to do, because they had the support of the business community and the school districts and the people in general, you know. And it's reciprocal, you know. we gave them something valuable in return.
Absolutely. Well,
And
thank you.
continue to do that, don't we?
We do. It's an important part of the legacy you left behind. Well, I know one of the beauties of community colleges, and often our students tell us that what they enjoy most about our instructors are, it's not just theory. They've lived it.
Yeah.
They work on that profession, or they have worked in the profession. And so, you know, even though today we've talked quite a bit about your legacy in starting the branch, you have quite a legacy, because you think of a ton of people whose lives you've positively impacted, not only from starting the branch, but the doctoral students that you've mentored along the way and helped them achieve their goals. So,
well, one
I'm
of the
grateful.
things that I should have mentioned to you is that some of my graduates from several years ago have now become college presidents of community colleges and vice presidents, and so hopefully they will pass on that, that knowledge and not only knowledge, but just that feeling of what community colleges are really all about.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing with me some of the insights that you gleaned as a president, and hopefully we all can learn from the legacy that you left us and continue to build on that.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, and I'm very proud of this institution and that it has continued to make us all proud.